there's an inherent thing about Cleveland where we're always kind of struggling to kind of get ahead.
It's a rock mecca. It likes rock and roll.
I don't think Cleveland was the birthplace. I think it was the birthplace of the name.
There was a disc jockey in Cleveland named Alan Freed, and he began playing what were sort of rhythm and blues records and things on his station, and it was primarily considered music for African American people, but what they found out was that suddenly a lot of white younger people were starting to listen to his station and his show. There was a record store here, and a lot of the white kids were going and buying these records that previously everyone thought was just for black people.
He started using the term rock and roll about that time because he and a friend of his that owned a record store start using it. Rock and roll actually is older than when they made the name. I heard the term rock and roll back in the 49 and 50. When I heard it the first time, it was in a little bar on 65th and Central when I was changing the records on a jukebox. And I heard this guy telling this girl at the bar, "Come on, baby, let's rock, let's roll." And what he meant was, let's go to bed, because it was a sexual term.
And then back in 1952, there was a concert here in Cleveland. It was called the Moondog Coronation Ball, and it's widely considered the first ever rock and roll concert.
So that's what put it on the map, put rock and roll on the map.
Well, it started out as sort of like a trend of objecting to things that were happening. And that's really where rock started. It started the kids objecting to the things that they didn't like. It was their first voice, really. Long before they were standing, in groups objecting to the war, they did it through the music. The musicians did it. And that brought the kids into the show. What happened is this. People used to play other people's music. Rock changed that. Rock changed it to where bands played only their own music. Well, they might play a cover once in a while, but it got to the point where if you didn't write it, you didn't play it. And that was very unusual, because if you go back in the 30s and 40s, songwriters would write the songs, go pick the best people to break the song, and all of a sudden, it changed. Songwriters weren't writing the songs. It was the kids. They wrote it, played it, lived it. Other bands copied it, carried like the bee carries the pollen around the country. And it was a different expression that nobody ever saw before.
I think what distinguishes Cleveland more than a musical style is its appetite. It's a fundamentally working class city, so it identifies, so rock and roll is its soundtrack, so to speak. There aren't many famous bands from Cleveland. There are just very few, in fact, but its appetite for rock and roll is very strong.
Well, I think Cleveland overall is and always has been really a great city for rock and roll. It was really one of the breakout cities back in the 50s and 60s and 70s for bands.
I think what made it grow so fast in those days is because Cleveland has such a large variety of cultures. And they could come here with a record, and if it broke out of here, they said it would break any place. And we were actually the test spot for a lot of the songs. Jesus Christ Superstar is a perfect example. The only place in the country that ever got big was here. And if it had died, you'd have never had the opera, because they were committed only to the single. David Bowie was huge here, and yet across the country he wasn't. And because MMS was such a powerful station, a lot of the other radio stations copied them. Whatever they were playing, they jumped on.
They could get airplay in Cleveland, and if it would sell in Cleveland, it would sell basically anywhere. And a lot of the labels looked to Cleveland to break their artists.
The Agora's been around 47 years. We've done just about every national act you can think of. Very few that we haven't done. Back in the 60s and 70s, we've played everybody from starting a lot of English acts had come through here, like Peter Frampton and King Crimson, Spooky Tooth. We've done everybody from Springsteen to U2, and everybody between, The Clash. We used to record all our shows. We've got a little over 400 shows recorded, and we've done a five-camera shoot with about 10 video shows. I got a phone call from a fellow by the name of Bill Ham. He's the manager of a group called CZ Top. And he said, I heard that if I want to break the Midwest, I got to play your club. And I said, well, thanks for the compliment. I said, but what's the name of your act? And he said, ZZ Top. And I said, I never heard of them. He said, well, they're very big down south. And I figured, okay, they could be big down south. I've seen that happen. So he came in, and I made the deal with him, $250 for him to play the club. And when he gets there, I find out that this was on a Sunday, that on Saturday they had played the Houston Astrodome, and there were 55,000 people there, and they were the only act on the show. It was their show. They had flown all their equipment to Cleveland on a plane for $250. It probably wouldn't pay for, the oil that the plane used. And this pressed the hell out of me.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame actually started back in the sort of mid-1980s, and a couple of people were involved in starting it. One was Jan Wenner, who's the editor and publisher of Rolling Stone magazine. Another person was Ahmet Ertegun, who was the founder and head of Atlantic Records, and a couple other people. And they basically thought it was time to honor some of the people who had really played important roles. And then every city in the country wanted it. What Cleveland sort of did differently is they got all the government officials behind it. They got the governor of Ohio and the mayor of Cleveland, all that. They really got behind it to support it. Then at one point there's a national newspaper here called USA Today, and they did a poll, where should the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame be? And so all of the radio and TV stations in Cleveland had everyone from Cleveland call in, and Cleveland ended up winning. I think they had like 10,000 more votes than Memphis, which was second. So basically all that support and everything really caused people in New York to agree to put the museum here. So the museum opened in September of 1995.
I think that when it first started, I think the institution itself lacked something. I didn't see where it was going in the direction that I had envisioned when I first got involved with them. But no, it deserved to get the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame here because of its history.
I'm a fan of small punk rock bands as much as I'm a fan of huge stadium rock bands. I think you can get into the politics of what the Rock Hall might be, but I think anything that shines a spotlight on what's going on in the city is a good thing. I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening there, and I think there's room in town for a large monolithic pyramid of rock as well as smaller places. I think for what they're doing, I think it's an awesome thing.
When they called it the Rock Capital, I think it was. Is it the Rock and Roll Capital now? I don't believe so. I think things have changed. I think it's moved around. You've got cities that are actually supporting musicians, where I think this city has really missed the boat. So if you ask me who the Rock and Roll Capital, it would not be Cleveland anymore. I think we gave up that title 10, 15 years ago.
It hasn't, the past maybe 15 years haven't been the best for Cleveland, but I would say only in the past couple years, a lot of really cool things have been happening in the city. A lot of the bigger venues closed down, so it's opened up a lot of smaller venues. People, our age that are interesting and have good taste and can afford to do cool things. So there are a lot of really cool stuff happening in different parts of the city.
To recover, the city's going to have to understand that when they do an induction ceremony like they did, and the city puts up millions of dollars to allow it to be here, and yet all those people that were inducted all came from the roots, not of a place this size here, but that little room you saw. All of them were born in that little room, or a little room just like it around the country. And those little rooms supported those groups until they became famous. And what's happening now is they're doing nothing to help those little rooms survive. They're taxing them to death, and they're putting them out of business instead of supporting them. That's what's wrong with this city. And I've been against it. We've been fighting it for the last couple of years, trying to help these little clubs survive.
The Happy Dog, which is a really cool bar/restaurant. Now That's Class is a really cool punk place. The Grog Shop is kind of the staple alternative indie rock place. That's kind of where most of the medium-sized indie rock touring bands are playing there and Beachland. But there are a lot of little places that are cropping up.
They may be my competitors, but actually they are a part of a group that we all need. They need me, I need them. The more there are of them, the better the business is. And the city's got to understand that they should be supporting those clubs and supporting musicians.
And I guess because of my involvement in the music scene from more of a production standpoint, I see a better cross-section of what's happening. And I think that Cleveland is really kind of going through a really cool thing right now with a lot of bands. My take is that I think Cleveland has kind of stopped focusing on what other cities are doing and focusing on what we do best, which is like it's always an honest, hard rock, working class kind of thing. It's not art for the sake of art per se. It's more rock and roll, and I think that there are a lot of really interesting bands doing that right now, and I think it's a pretty exciting time to be part of the Cleveland community.
There are probably 5 to 8 concerts any one night of the week in the different venues here in town, and mostly either nationally known or internationally known artists. So Cleveland still rocks hard.
It's a cliche, rock and roll will never die. No, but it'll shrink. It'll take its place among different kinds of music, especially as the world becomes more global, so you hear music from different cultures.
Gotta make us feel the way